Let me tell you a story. I think around roughly a year ago, I got called by a company, and and they were a bit struggling. And I'm saying, okay, let me come in, and I'll just have maybe have a chat with your company. And then what I discovered is that they had a very well-oiled delivery machine. Everything, I mean, every Scrum Master and product owners here would dream about that environment. They were always on time. They were applying pure Scrum per the book, having their all their meetings, their grooming sessions. There were almost no bugs. Honestly, they were hiring QA that most of the time were doing just nothing. They were testing. There were no bug. So like, okay, then what's the issue there? Now I ask a very simple question. How do you measure success? And I asked the product manager, and the guy was like, well, when CS and sales don't complain, I'm like, okay, it's an interesting one. Because the thing is that the one thing that they really forgot, so there's a bit of a go here, that there is a very basic principle. You can have the best well-oiled delivery machine of the world. If you fill it with shit, you'll get shit out. Hi, my name is Timote, and I'm really here to demystify a bit on qualitative research and how we do actually customers interviews. But yeah, that's usually the first reaction I got when I start talking about that topic. But bear with me. You know, the issue is very simple. Yes, we do all talk to, or some of us are talking to customers. We are analyzing, watching screen records and others. But are we really doing the right way? What are we getting out of that? That's usually the questions that are quite overlooked. Because my issue is that most of the time we tend to really reinvent the wheel. Because I hear it every time that I have people contacting me and say, hey, how can I improve things? The first thing they ask me, hey, do you have any tips on how to do interviews and how to crack that? Or do you have any set of questions and what are the questions that I should ask to people and to customers? But you're starting from the wrong point. The thing is that we ignore and we forget that product discovery is actually the combination of two sciences, sociology and psychology. Particularly sociology when you're really looking at the problem. Because what we actually do is that we try to understand a group of people sharing similarities with the intent of solving the problem through technology to actually have business impact. That's why some people are leaving now. My point is that we are really ignoring a century of research and improvement. We ignore all the work that has been done for a century in qualitative research. And it goes down to one particular person, called named Max Weber. He is born in 1864. Remember in the previous talk where we're seeing that we were dinosaurs because some of people here are born after the Scrum Manifesto? Tell me about that guy. He founded really the foundation of what we actually doing in product management. He's the first person that say that we should go beyond the obvious, beyond what people are saying, but trying to understand what is going behind the meanings, the motives, and the intention of people. No, I don't really. I'm not here to do any history class. I'm really trying to make my point here that whatever we do in product management is actually about risk mitigation. You heard it earlier. Why are we doing all this? Just before, because we realize that we don't want to be wrong. In a way, our intent as product people is to first ensure that we are focusing on the right problems, the one that worth being solved. And we want to make sure that it's clearly defined. And once we have identified the right problem, we want to make sure they're building the right solution. And for that, we should take a scientific approach because we want to have something that is measurable, repeatable, and continuous. We aim for business impact. We're not doing things for the sake of doing them. We do them to solve customers' problem in a scalable and meaningful way. Don't worry, I'll really try to make it very simple for you. So you see, here I'm really not saying anything different from what you're doing. My point is that you should not change what you do. You should change the way you do it. And I have a very simple, basic framework for that. You always start from a point where there are things that you know. You may have a vague idea of a problem. You collect a first insight. Someone from your organization comes with you with something. And out of the thing that you know, you realize that there are things that you don't know. And out of all the things that you don't know, you actually spot the thing that you should know. And among those things that you should know, that's where the real the work starts. Because you'll look at that and you'll start prioritizing them. And out of those ones, you'll start doing research or experiment in order to know more things. And then you continue again. And out of that, you are feeding it, you have new knowledge. And out of that knowledge, you will continue up until the point where you're like, okay, I know enough now to move forward. I have a clear problem. And then afterward, I have a clear solution. And to do all this, because you know the point, it was qualitative research, right? We're actually only using one method. And the one thing that you should remember is that very simple two words, grounded theory. Grounded theory is a method, and it's very simple. It's the one that you are actually using without knowing it. That you are doing some research, collecting insights, and feeding again this insight into your research, and you're continuously improving, building the theory up until you reach a point where the theory is fulfilled. I swear to you, it will be simple. So, but let's be honest, I lied a bit because now we're getting into the really concrete things, a bit tough, but it all starts by something very simple. If you don't know what looking for, you will never find it out. So the first thing to ask yourself is, what are you researching? What is your research question? What is the one thing you want to uncover? And once you have identified that, so you have your research question, then you start building hypotheses. Remember, grounded theory. You start by writing a question, and you build up your theory, a possible answer to that question. And think that it is actually simple, but we are making it complex. Writing a research question is very practical and pragmatical. It must be specific, right? It must be focused on one question, not multiple ones. It must be feasible, because if you ask yourself a question and you already know that you can't answer it, why don't you even waste your time, right? And it must be relevant to your topic. I think that sounds a bit obvious, right? And then it's the same for the hypothesis. It must be simple, must be concise, must be clear. Well, probably that's the one that is most challenging one, being non-ambiguous or not fulfilling multiple assumptions in what you say. So whoever reads that hypothesis should be able to interpret it the same way as you. And once you have this research question and hypothesis, then you can start asking yourself, okay, if this is my question, and if this is my hypothesis, who should I talk to? Who should I interview? And that's what we call the sampling method. That's also something that you're doing. At some point, you ask yourself, who should I interview? Who are the customers or the stakeholders I should talk to? But there again, doing slightly different. There are actually 4 methods for that. It's either purposive, either snowball, quota, or convenience. Purpose is very simple. You have defined a certain set of criteria, and you're aiming for that. So you say, I want to talk to people that are working in the HR department of an organization with a certain size, or that has certain artifact. That's very purpose if you know who you want to interview. Snowball is when you find the first person and you ask that person to introduce you to others. To give you a very simple example of that, a couple of times ago, a very famous brand, current competitor of Prada, reach out to us and say, hey, we want to go e-commerce. But the thing is that we want to validate how people will purchase online. What's the behavior? Because we only have traditional shops, and going online is a big mystery. But these clothes, to give you a very simple example, similar t-shirt as mine, they are selling it between 600 and 1,000 euros per pieces. Not everyone can afford that, not me. And that's where you have to start using Snowball, because it's not written online that people are earning a couple of millions a year, because that's their target segment. So we had to find one and asking that person to introduce us to others, and therefore ultimately reach a point where we interviewed sufficient amount of people. Quota is when you are having multiple artifacts. It's a bit similar to purposive, but where you say, I want to be a bit of this and this criteria, because in your hypothesis, you consider this may have an influence on how they will answer the research question. And convenience is usually used by journalists to say, hey, or the one thing that you would be doing on Slack, say, I'm searching for people with certain that would be interested in talking about that subject. And you let people coming to you. And then we have research techniques. Actually, that's also very simple. There is only 3. Either you are doing interviews, either you're doing observations, or you're organizing focus groups. Interviews, you have 3 types of them. Either it's closed, semi-guided, or open. The closed one, you never use them. Closed form qualitative research, but very difficult to analyze and to structure, especially for a product manager. So you come down to 2. Either it's open, either it's semi-guided. Open is usually the one that you start with, where you have no clue about the topic, you won't really want to observe and say, okay, I'm open, I'll try to collect information so that I can start writing my first hypothesis. And the semi-guided one is usually the one that 99% of the time you would use. Then you have observations. That's also something that we are using without even knowing it. Now we are really lucky. You can, and let's be clear on the very particular part, you can be incognito, so no one knows that you are actually watching, observing them, or you can be in the open. And then you can be synchronous or asynchronous. Synchronous in, for example, an incognito, meaning you go in a place where some customers may use your product and you just observe how they do it. And the opposite, you can also be asynchronous, because you may record people's screen and then analyze what they're doing with your application. And the last one, in focus group, is probably the most difficult one to use, because you gather a group of between 7, 9 people to discuss, address a topic with them, and then usually you will be 2 people. And then you can either be in a dual moderator principle or the dueling moderator. Dual means that you have one person asking the question or animating the group, and the other one just observing. And dueling means that you have one person taking a certain position into the questions, and the other moderator is actually coming with a counter arguments to feed the debate. Obviously, there are some research techniques that you can use, and some quick checklists. I think it's important that you keep in mind what I'm doing before, during, and after my interview. You don't need to scan that thing. You can just drop me a message. I'll give it for free to you. Much easier. Remember, there are a couple of artifacts. I can't go there because there will be way too much time. But an interview kit is a very important one. This is mostly focused on semi-guided interviews because the one that you will use the most. Quite often you neglect the preparation. It's a very essential part because you have your research question, you have your hypothesis. Out of your hypothesis, you will start asking questions to validate whether or invalidate whether your hypothesis is right or wrong. And you have to prepare that to avoid introducing biases. And we'll discuss about bias a bit afterward. So you have also to think about the setup and the preparation. Are you sure that you'll be in a setup in an environment if you're doing live interview where there won't be too much noise, where the person will have enough time to actually do the interview? Will the person be on time? Will you be able to record that interview? During, obviously, don't forget to get consent. We are in 2024. GDPR is a thing. Voice is a thing. And then obviously after, and that's where the big job work, right? That you collect all that thing, then you have to code them, summarize it, share that knowledge with others. Let me tell you a bit of principle because that's typical number one question. I say, yeah, but how do you know that you have interviewed enough people? And I'll introduce you a slightly different also topics because we haven't addressed that today. There is a big difference between qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative, it's about you want to see the spectrum. You want to see all the different variation of things. Whereas when you do quantity, you want to go hard, you want to go deep. Hence, the saturation arrives when you reach a point where you are not collecting additional information. So at some point, you realize by asking the same set of questions that you would have eventually improved by all the data that you collected, where you reach a point where you interview an additional person saying, not learning anything new here. And then you say, oh, I may still ask another one. And you ask and you interview another person, and that's where you reach that saturation. Triangulation is key because we try to say that you should look at things from 3 different angles. Again, big words, but if you only interview, let's say that you have taken a sampling process and you went through Snowball. What tells you that the thing that people have in common in those group of people does not introduce a bias? So you may question yourself, I may try to go interview different people, so taking a different perspective on things. You may also question yourself about your influence, the people that have interviewed. Think, are they reintroducing a bias or something? That's why we're trying to view things from 3 different angles to validate that we are actually going to the right direction. Putting into practice, you may have customer success feedback. You may have semi-guided interviews and screen records. You may have market data analysis, customer interviews, and CS data or sales data, crafting information from different angles, ensuring that you are still looking at the things from the right angle and you are heading to the right direction. I introduced that a bit before, the different bias. And actually, you can categorize that in 5. You have the design bias. So how have you picked the right, let's say, techniques and approach? Was qualitative research the right one? The selection. Remember, sampling methods. You may have picked the wrong one, or this may have an influence that we just discussed. And you have the data collection. So the way you have interviewed people in your research kit. Are you sure that you haven't introduced any bias into that? And then there is, again, this is a whole word in itself. I think we could do a couple of hours talk about just biases. Then on the analysis part, are you not taking shortcut? Are you sure that you are really analyzing the data that you have collected and information the right way? And my favorite one, the publication bias. You can do the best ever analysis. But if you put that on a SharePoint space, that no one gets access to, your research worth nothing. Reflexivity is an important one, and we quite often neglect the impact that we have on the research, who we are. We have our perception, we have our opinions. We aren't just biased by default. We initiated that research, we crafted the research question, we are discussing with people, even we are analyzing ourselves. It's important to take a step back and say, okay, am I still have a neutral view on that, or am I getting too excited? Am I actually taking shortcut or speeding in my research? Maybe I should ask someone else to just do the analysis and review or re-listening an interview to ensure that he's hearing it the same way as I do. And remember, it's an iterative process. We are starting from a point where we have plenty of things that we don't know. We try to identify the one that we should know. We collect that information, we learn new things, and we look back at the reality and our reality in a different way because we are feeding that into our research, and we keep on doing that. And we also keep on learning. It's an empirical process. No one was good at interviewing the first time. We are always crap, right? But we are learning. And what is important is that we reflect on that, and we are putting ourselves in a situation where we can improve. Hence the fact that it has to be measurable and repeatable. If you don't prepare your interview, if you don't write your interview kit correctly, how can you actually ensure that what you collect from the people that you're interviewing is actually the right things? You just can't. And that's the number one mistake that I see. People don't say, oh yeah, but I know the topic, I know what I want to talk with a person. And then you see them and they say, okay, just go for it. And usually that's the first thing that I do when I have to coach someone doing that. I say, okay, prepare yourself. I give them, explain them what they should do, then I'll let them do it under control. Then I go with them during the interview, and I'll let them do it. Most of the time, they don't come with an interview kit. Most of the time, they don't even prepare that. They do. They ask questions. They are advising. They are interviewing people, and we're asking sometimes very real questions. And then we do the sentence, and then I do the list of all the things that I would have asked. And all the things that remember that question, they remember that hypothesis that we had before. Have you been able to validate them? 100% of the time, they got only half of the information they could have collected from an interview. But the issue is of you doing that, you're burning your weapon. You can't interview that person second time because you may have introduced a lot of bias, and then the second time you interview the person, they would have plenty of time to try to guess what you are interested in, and they want to be nice. And instead of answering honestly to your question, they will just actually tell you what you want to hear, and then you're screwed. So, very principle, very basic. Remember, we thought about we have to really look at is the problem, where it's being solved. That's what you call problem framing. And then once we know what we want to solve, is how can we solve it? And actually, we are using the same techniques, and most of the time it's qualitative ones. And if you look at the very pragmatical situation, you would have a CEO or leader coming and say, hey, remember that thing I like to, because I have an idea of this feature, and I talk to your customers or to our board and think that we should go into that direction. And then I go, okay. Remember actually Phil talking about first question is hey, why don't we attack that segment or that new market? Super open question like, oh shit, they tell me about going to the US, for example, I have no clue about the US, can we do that? And then the first thing you do is say, oh, maybe I'll talk to someone that already have a business in the US so I can understand. That's where you use open. You're doing qualitative research, you're doing an open interview because you just want to broadly understand what is the US and how does eventually would influence you. And then you start having additional research or additional hypotheses, then you craft them. And then you start knowing where to look. And intuitively, you go into up until you have a point where you have a better clear view on what it would take to go into the US. And from there, you keep on going up until you know, okay, we'll go to the US, we'll attack that segment actually, I will take it that way, and probably we should do X, Y, Z. And then once you have there, you have a clear problem with a high-level solution, and then you do the same, and then you repeat, but in the solution part, up until you have solved the problem. And obviously, and that's why it's continuous, most of the time, if you're doing that well, it doesn't take you time. It doesn't take you long. Doing discovery will probably take you 2, 3, 4 hours a week maximum. Because the thing is that if you are doing it continuously, the volume of information and knowledge that you are acquiring is much bigger than the one that you can absorb to actually concretely do things with your team. So you reach a point where doing that continuously a couple of hours a week is giving you so much clarity that you can start looking much ahead into your pipeline, into your roadmap. And that's how you are able to control your future, control your environment, and actually do proper product management. I hope so. My key point is that you never, ever communicate enough. Because there is one thing of doing customers interview, and there is another of keeping it for you. You're not doing discovery for yourself. You're doing that for your organization with the sake of solving customers' problem. But solving customers' problems is not about building softwares. Right? It's not about writing line of code. It's not about keeping your development team busy. It's about solving the problem however it takes. And quite often, solutions are obvious. Solution may just be improving your flows. It might be sharing information with the sales team or with your CS team so they can do themselves a better job at serving the customer. Even this week, I had product manager in for one of my customers was frustrated because he came and we had a clear problem. Thinking about solution, he was creating a very gas pipeline solution. I said, why don't you use that intercom thing? Just put 2 more data via the API, and you can do everything in intercom. And it's like, yeah, but if we do that, we're not storing the data, and then eventually we won't be able to use it afterwards. I said, do you know how you'll use it? No, but then why don't you waste your time? Product management is not about building your software, it's about solving customers' problem. It's about collecting additional data to help you move forward. So it means summarizing, sharing highlights, helping your sales team sales better because you have better customer story than them. Craft it for them, help them. Do the same for your CS team. If you see a problem that can be solved by your CS team, share that information. Ensure that your customers are happy. They will return you the favor and you will have more customers. So I hope now that you understand that, yes, it's not about doing different things. It's about doing things differently. Thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that time with me. I'm slightly ahead of time. I think that I have a minute and a half in front of me. So I really wonder, should we go for eventually some questions?
I'm afraid that Jim is going to be starting his keynote momentarily, and we need to get across the hall.
Everyone out! Thanks to you, everyone.
But Timote is here tomorrow.
Yeah.
So if you're intrigued, and you should be, because this is really, he's lying, it's complex and fascinating stuff. Dig deeper tomorrow. I'm sure he'd be happy to have a conversation.
Yeah, and actually we'll fill with, I think we hacked a bit the thing and we have a full afternoon of working sessions. I'm happy to do whatever you want. It would be valuable for you guys.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
That was terrific. Thanks.